An American can look at a map of Australia and think they understand what remote means. Then they drive for hours without passing a traffic light, a shopping mall, or sometimes even another car. And suddenly they realize something. In Australia, isolation isn't just about being far from a major city. Today we're going deep into 12 of Australia's most isolated towns and settlements, and we're starting with number 12. By the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why just popping into town can mean something completely different in the Australian Outback. Number 12, Tibooburra, New South Wales. Imagine driving toward the far northwestern corner of New South Wales, watching the landscape become drier, flatter, and more enormous, until you finally reach Tibooburra. Visit NSW describes it as one of the furthest reaches of the state and a true outback town. And that's exactly what makes it fascinating. Tibooburra isn't some abandoned ghost town. It's a real community with a history stretching back to the Gold Rush era, surrounded by the huge landscapes of Sturt National Park. For an American visitor, the first shock might not be the town itself. It would be the sheer amount of Australia surrounding it. Imagine looking out and seeing a landscape that seems to keep going forever. Your phone might tell you where you are, but it doesn't make the distance feel any shorter. And here's the thing about places like Tibooburra. Isolation becomes part of everyday planning. You don't casually forget to check fuel. You don't assume the next town is 5 minutes away. You think ahead. You carry what you need. And that is where the Australian outback lifestyle starts to feel completely different from suburban American life. Number 11, Oodnadatta, South Australia. Oodnadatta is the kind of place that makes an American say, "Wait, people actually live here?" The town sits along the famous Oodnadatta Track, one of Australia's iconic outback routes. South Australian tourism describes it as an isolated desert town and a final refuge for travelers before they push farther toward the Simpson Desert. The population is tiny by American standards. A South Australian tourism feature describes roughly 200 people living there, and even ordinary grocery delivery can be a major logistical challenge. Think about that for a second. In a typical American suburb, you can order groceries online and have them delivered with relatively little thought. Here, supplying isolated communities can involve an actual mail run across enormous distances. One South Australian mail service travels hundreds of kilometers serving isolated people and properties. And that tells you something important. In places like Oodnadatta, distance isn't just scenery. Distance affects how people receive mail, buy supplies, travel, and organize their lives. For an American watching this, the question becomes less, would I visit? And more, could I actually live this way every day? And we're only at number 11. Number 10, Maury, South Australia. Maury sits at the junction of two legendary outback routes, the Birdsville Track and the Oodnadatta Track. To an American, the word junction might sound like a normal crossroads. Out here, it means something completely different. You're talking about a remote outback community surrounded by enormous distances and rugged terrain. One of the most interesting things about Maury is that it sits inside a network of places where road conditions and preparation actually matter. South Australia's Outback Travel Guidance warns travelers to research current road conditions and carry enough fuel, food, and water for remote desert travel. Imagine telling someone from a major American city, "Before you drive to the next town, make sure you've got enough water in case the road doesn't cooperate." That changes your entire definition of a road trip. In America, getting lost can mean taking the wrong highway exit. In the Outback, getting unprepared can become a serious problem. And that's why these towns aren't simply small towns. They're communities built around a completely different relationship with distance. Number 9, Milparinka, New South Wales. This one is almost hard to believe. Milparinka was once a bustling gold mining town. Today, Visit NS Dollars describes it as being home to just a handful of people and a single pub. Think about the contrast. A place that once had hundreds of people and multiple hotels eventually became a tiny settlement with only a handful of residents. An American might look at that and immediately think, where is everybody? But that's part of the story of rural Australia. Some towns grew because of gold, pastoral industries, transport routes, or other opportunities. When those industries changed, the population could shrink dramatically. Yet the town's history remained. Today, Milparinka offers a glimpse into that earlier outback world, with restored historic buildings and the old Albert Hotel still standing. Number 8, William Creek, South Australia. Now we're getting seriously small. South Australian tourism describes William Creek as having a permanent population of just 6 people, and calls it possibly the state's smallest town. 6 people. That's not a typo. Imagine an American saying, "I'm moving to a small town," and then discovering the entire permanent population could fit around one dinner table. William Creek sits near Lake Eyre and is surrounded by the vast South Australian Outback. The town also serves as a base for aviation and remote area tourism, with scenic flights operating from the area. And this is where the word town starts to mean something very different. In America, even many small towns have schools, supermarkets, gas stations, restaurants, and entire neighborhoods. William Creek operates on a completely different scale. For someone used to American convenience, the idea of living somewhere with only a handful of permanent residents could sound almost impossible. But for someone who loves the Outback, that isolation is precisely the attraction. And that contrast is what makes these places so interesting. What one person sees as isolation, another person sees as freedom. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this journey into the Australia that most Americans never see, hit the like button. It helps this channel reach more people who are fascinated by Australian life, culture, and the differences Americans notice when they look beyond Australia's major cities. And subscribe, because the next few places are about to get even more extreme. Number 7. Birdsville, Queensland. Birdsville might be one of the most famous remote towns on this list. Queensland Tourism describes it as a frontier town deep in isolated country, positioned between the Simpson Desert and Sturt's Stony Desert. Its famous sign says Population 100, although major events can temporarily transform the town as thousands of visitors arrive for the Birdsville races and Big Red Bash. Now imagine being a resident when the crowds leave. One moment the town can feel packed by remote Australia standards. Then the event ends, the visitors disappear, and the vast Outback returns. That's a completely different rhythm of life from what many Americans know. There isn't a giant suburban population surrounding you. There isn't another major city sitting just beyond the horizon. There is simply Birdsville, the landscape, and a long distance in almost every direction. And yet people love it. That's the part an American might not expect. Remote doesn't automatically mean miserable. Some people actively want fewer crowds, more space, and a life far away from major cities. Number 6. Inaminka, South Australia. If you want to understand Australian isolation, Inaminka is one of those names that deserves attention. It's a remote South Australian settlement associated with the Strzelecki Track and the rugged northeastern corner of the state. Reaching places like this isn't like taking a casual Sunday drive. South Australia's remote road guidance emphasizes checking road conditions and carrying enough supplies for desert travel. And that's the recurring theme we're seeing. The more isolated the community becomes, the more self-reliance matters. A person living in a major American city can often solve a problem by driving somewhere. A person living in a remote Australian settlement may need to plan before the problem happens. Fuel, water, food, vehicle condition, weather, road conditions, communication. Everything becomes part of the calculation. That's why the Outback produces a very different kind of independence. Number 5. Coober Pedy, South Australia. Now this is where the video gets weird. Coober Pedy is remote, famous, and unlike almost anywhere an American visitor has probably seen before. South Australian tourism describes it as an underground town in the heart of the desert, and Australia's opal capital. Thousands of people have called this place home over time, and some residents live underground in homes known as dugouts. Why? Because the desert environment can be brutally hot, and living beneath the surface can offer a very different environment from the one outside. Think about how strange this sounds from an American perspective. You arrive in a town and someone says, "My house is underground." Then you walk inside and discover that underground living isn't some science fiction experiment. It's part of the town's identity. Coober Pedy is also built around opal mining, which has attracted people looking for both work and the possibility of finding something valuable beneath the ground. If you enjoyed this journey through Australia's most isolated communities, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because this channel isn't just about the Australia tourists see in postcards. We're exploring Australian life through American eyes. Turn on the notification bell for the second part.